Fantasy Football Podcast. As you can see, we're back to our original setup. It's just me in front of the camera, and that's because Brian and John are both at and watching their playoff baseball game tonight. It's Yankees Red Sox, so I understand why they can't be here. But because of that, we're going to have a slightly different episode. I'm not going to be able to get into every single matchup. That's just going to take us way too long. So, really just going to focus on talking about guys. We're a quarter of the way through the season. We got some flex plays, some waiver targets, and just kind of reacting to what happened in a week 4 fantasy football. So we're going to go just roll right on into it. So as always, I'm your monotone master. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram as While You're Wrong FFB, and on Twitter as You're Wrong FFB. And if you're listening, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or even just watch the show on YouTube. But before we roll into it, one thing I just want to get started with is we'd really love some of your feedback, some of your questions. If you have start questions, or if you want to know who to pick up, or if you're tilting on someone halfway through the week, reach out to us through Instagram, comment on YouTube. We'll do our best to respond. We want to make this as interactive as possible with you guys, just so that it's more fun for everyone involved going forward. To get into some few quick headlines of week 4, one of the things I just want to start is, where are my Zeke and Clyde haters at? We've had back-to-back weeks of Clyde Edwards-Helaire over 100 yards and a touchdown, and Zeke is the running back 4 on the season. At the beginning of the year, when everyone was panicking, we saw too much Tony Pollard. We saw Clyde Edwards-Helaire not getting enough of the ball. Looks like things have completely changed, but you still need to monitor the fact that Tony Pollard's still a part of this offense, and Zeke may not be the pivotal point on the Chiefs, but since he's the running back on one of the best offenses in football, he's still going to get enough opportunities to be successful for fantasy. Another thing is, are the Titans and Bengals terrible defenses, or are the Jets and Jaguars not easy matchups anymore? And also, are the Steelers a team that you can just stream against if someone is playing against the Steelers with how bad Ben Roethlisberger looks? Could you stream a defense now? I think the answer might be maybe. Maybe if it's a middle of the pack defense versus the Steelers, you could actually have a good fantasy day from that defense instead of worrying about the Steelers offense torching them, because now we're getting on to year 2 of the Steelers offenses looking pedestrian and stagnant. Unfortunately, Brian and John have not got the headlines in, so we're going to get right into the Devil's Advocate team. And this was a good week for this team. This was a bad week for some of us. So for the Devil's Advocate team in week 4, we had Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback, Mike Evans, Jamar Chase at wide receiver, Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley as our running backs. Tight end was Dallas Goedert, and the flex was Kenny Golladay, and that put up 106 points this week. Now, unfortunately, I only put up 90 because I'm not including the kicker or the defense. I lost. Brian only put up 92, losing as well, going to 2-2. John put up a nice 108 this week, staying 4-0 against the Devil's Advocate team. So congrats to that, John, our raging Rumney. Now to just get into some more impactful news. The injury news that everyone's been talking about this week is David Montgomery went down due to injury. Thankfully, it's not a torn ACL. The team has said he's only going to be out to 4 to 5 weeks, which means Tariq Cohen is still in the PUP. Damian Williams is the running back to try to pick up in the meantime. Jimmy Garoppolo injured his calf halfway through the game. Trey Lance came in and threw for 157 yards, 2 touchdowns, and added 41 rushing yards, giving him a 20-point fantasy day in only half a game. Now, this is typically where a quarterback with Trey Lance's draft pedigree typically takes over for the season. Jimmy Garoppolo is questionable for week 5 against Arizona, so maybe this is the turning point where it's Trey Lance's team. Maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is healthy enough to take the reins back, and we're just going to wait and see more news on that. Teddy Bridgewater entered into concussion protocol, so Drew Lock came in the game and looked like Drew Lock. Now, Drew Lock is going to be the starter versus Pittsburgh at the moment, so I'm not super confident in any Broncos right now. And as we saw, Joe Mixon walked away with an injury. He's day-to-day with an ankle injury, so that's better than week-to-week. Hopefully it's not something like last year where the Bengals make it out to not be a lot and then he ends up not playing for the rest of the season. He's walking around fine on the sideline after he got hurt, so at worst, I think he misses this week, but should be back the following week. Also, Will Fuller broke his finger. He's going to be week-to-week trying to recover. Now, receivers can play with broken fingers, but with how bad the Dolphins are doing, I want to be starting Will Fuller anytime soon. Some other news that's just something you want to notice is Miles Sanders versus Kenneth Gainwell. Had a 2-1 snap count, but Sanders walked away with 13 rushing yards, 3 for 34 for a total of 6 points, while Gainwell had 31 rushing yards, a touchdown, then went 6 for 58 through the air for 17.9. So Miles Sanders is out snapping Gainwell about 2-1, but Gainwell is a little bit more talented at the moment. They brought him in to be the pass catching back. Miles Sanders still is talented, but he's not going to get the full workload, which some managers hoped he would. That's just going to be something to monitor going forward. It's going to be hard to start Gainwell with confidence if it's not full PPR, just because we know he's the third down back. We really don't know when he's going to be getting those rushing snaps. One thing to point out is Chris Carson versus Alex Collins pretty much had an even split. It was a 45 to 39% snap count. Carson only ended the day with 30 rushing yards, going 1 for 1 through the air. And Alex Collins, 44 rushing yards and a touchdown, then 2 catches for 34 yards, ended with about 5 times as many fantasy points as Chris Carson. Now, this just could be scheme, this just could be fatigue, this just could be a number of things. I'm not freaking out about having Chris Carson as my running back yet, but if you're a Chris Carson owner, you need to just be aware of this. Go scoop up Alex Collins in case something happens, in case Carson goes down due to injury. This is something to really be paying attention to if you're the Chris Carson manager out there. Also, Brandon Bolden has clearly taken over the James Wright role in the Patriots offense. After J.J. Taylor fumbled, Ramondre Stevenson still being punished for a Week 1 fumble. If you're desperate, if you're in a full PPR league, Brandon Bolden might be the guy to pick up if you're desperate for a flex level running back. Also, Derek Carr doesn't care about your fantasy team. He doesn't care about mine. I lost my fantasy game because of a Derek Carr interception. Now a number of other decisions factoring into me losing that game, but the nail in the coffin was the interception. Well, all I needed was about 20 more passing yards. I ended up losing my game by 1.7. So congrats to you, Dave, for just lucking out on one of the luckiest games you probably could have won. Now we've got a few flex pickups. Brian thankfully got his flex pickups suggestions in before the podcast started tonight. So for wide receiver, my flex pickup for the week is going to be AJ Green versus the 49ers. Now, that sounds odd to say because AJ Green just has this aurora around him that says he's old and he's washed, but he's had the same amount of targets as DeAndre Hopkins this year, which is very surprising. So against the 49ers secondary that's very banged up, we've seen a lot of the 49ers games be high scoring. The Cardinals will have to put up points, so AJ Green could be another sneaky flex start this week. Brian's suggestion is Darnell Mooney versus the Las Vegas Raiders. We've seen Darnell Mooney kind of be Justin Fields' number one target. I know that's hard to hear, Allen Robinson fans, but Darnell Mooney had about 100 yards last week. Seems to be the guy that Justin Fields is looking for. The Las Vegas Raiders are very beatable through the air, especially with the injuries that we've had. So if you're looking for a desperate flex play in deep leagues, Darnell Mooney could be that guy you're looking for. And running back, my pickup that's everyone's big pickup this week is Damian Williams versus the Raiders. He's going to be stepping into the role for David Montgomery. As we saw, Justin Fields isn't going to take over the game by himself, so the Bears will have to be running the football through Damian Williams until David Montgomery comes back from injury. Brian's pickup is a Michael Carter versus Atlanta. Now, unfortunately, if it's not full PPR, Michael Carter hasn't broke 10 points yet. He's had 9.5 in 2 games so far. He's emerged as the most talented back in the backfield. Playing against Atlanta, this is a soft defense. The Falcons are going to put up points, which means Michael Carter will have to be somewhat relevant. Now, he's a guy that I'm not fully confident in starting as an RB2, but if you're in a really deep 12-team, 14-team league, he'll be a desperation, okay, flex play or running back 2 if you're running back needy as a team. Some streamers to get into, some quarterback streamers. I'm going to say Kirk Cousins versus the Lions this week. The Lions have been very beatable at every single aspect of their defense. This is going to be a bounce back week for Kirk Cousins. The only drawback is if it's a big Dalvin Cook game and Kirk Cousins isn't throwing touchdowns, but he's moving the ball consistently. Kirk Cousins can probably get you 20 points, maybe has a good day and gets you to 25. I don't think he's going to be sub 15 or sub 16 like he was this past week. Brian's pick was rookie Mac Jones versus Houston. Houston's been very beatable as well. Mac Jones has looked the best out of the rookie quarterbacks so far. He looks like a very competent quarterback already. I think this is the week where he turns around, has a decent fantasy day. No one on the Houston defense scares you, so some of the Pats receiving options should find their way into the end zone this week. Mac Jones could have a solid game and maybe even sneaks one in for a rushing touchdown too. When it comes to tight end, Dawson Knox versus the Chiefs. Dawson Knox has been the tight end 6 so far, which is just surprising to say. He's one of those guys who just keeps falling into the end zone week after week. In a high-scoring game versus the Chiefs, the Bills' offense is going to have to score, so just why not take another shot on Dawson Knox this week? Brian's guy is Cameron Braid versus Miami. Miami hasn't had the best defense so far this year, and with Gronk being out, there needs to be a tight end for Tom Brady to throw to. You could take a shot in the dark on Cameron Braid this week, just hoping that he falls into the end zone, gets a few more targets than he did in the previous night versus the Patriots, who planned to shut down Tom Brady anyway, and it was also a rain game. Cameron Braid could bounce back and be a decent flex play streamer this week. When it comes to defense, I picked the Raiders versus the Bears. We saw Justin Fields get eaten alive by the Browns. Then he did all right versus the Lions. The Raiders are a much better defense than the Lions. This isn't going to be a game where the Raiders walk away with 20 points, but you could be walking away with around 8 points after a few sacks and not a lot of stuff going for the Bears potentially. Brian's pick is Carolina versus Philadelphia. Carolina through the first few weeks has shown to be a legitimate defense. Philly's offense, even though Justin Hurts has been good for fantasy, Devonta Smith has been good for fantasy, the tight ends have been good for fantasy, they haven't been a good offense overall, so Carolina could be another just sneaky start to get you in, I think, probably 5 or 6 points. Another defense that'd be good to pick up if they're out there is the Patriots. The Patriots are playing General Mills. We just saw what Buffalo did to Houston. The Patriots also have the Jets next week, so this could be a 2-week pickup if the Patriots are out there in waivers for you at the moment. So to get in some studs of the week, this is Brian's section that we love to talk about. So quarterback studs of the week, Matt Ryan, 29 points, Patrick Mahomes, 32.7, and Sam Darnold with a 33.5. Now that is padded by 2 rushing touchdowns because Christian McCaffrey is currently out due to injury, but Sam Darnold showing that he can get it done when he's not under the thumb of Adam Gase. For running back studs, Saquon Barkley came to life against a stout New Orleans defense, 52 rushing yards, a 74-yard reception, and 2 touchdowns, 27 points in total. Then Austin Eckler had a big night versus Raiders defense, 117 rushing yards, a touchdown, and then 328 for 1 through the air, ending in 28 points. Then we also saw Cordell Patterson just light it up, 34 rushing yards, 82 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. He's only in for 23 snaps, so it's almost at the point where you see Cordell Patterson walking onto the field, you know he's most likely going to get the ball. It's amazing that it took him this long, or finally the right offensive coordinator, to unlock his skill set in his career. But it's just fun to watch. It's so very fun to have if you're the Cordell Patterson owner. He's probably helped you out a little bit, winning some weeks for you recently. But it's just one of those plays where it's like he's not on the field all the time, which means he's not getting a ton of opportunities, but he's been making the most with the ones that he's been getting so far. When it comes to wide receiver, we saw Terry McLaurin have a great day, 6 for 123 and 2. Taylor Heineke is only seeing Terry McLaurin. That's awesome for fantasy. Not great for the Washington football team, but great for Terry McLaurin's fantasy output. Ended with 27.3 points. Deebo Samuel exploded once when Trey Lance came in, 8 for 156 and 2, ending with 31.7 points. Sorry if you were one of those managers like me who went up against Deebo Samuel this week. But gotta give a shout out to all the people who have been victimized by Tyreek Hill big day. 11 for 186 and 3 touchdowns against the Eagles, and with 42.1 points, and it looked like he wasn't even trying to play wide receiver. That's just how good Tyreek Hill is. On the other side, we got some big tight ends. Mo Cox, 3 for 42 and 2 touchdowns. Dawson Knox, as we mentioned earlier, 5 for 37 and 2 touchdowns. Then CJ Uzama, 5 for 95 and 2 touchdowns. Now, a few of these guys, maybe they don't score 2 touchdowns or a touchdown every week. CJ Uzama, this is probably just a flash in the pan. Most likely doesn't do this again, but you never know. Football's a weird place. Mo Cox, he's just a big body. All it takes is one catch from the fall into the end zone. Looks like he got 3 big catches this week. And then Dawson Knox continues to just be a guy open in the end zone for Josh Allen. Our big kickers of the week. Ryan Suckup, 15 points. Matt Prater, 15 points. Tyler Bass, 16 points. It pays to have a good kicker on a good offense because it means they're constantly going to be in the red zone. If they don't score, that means it's 3 points for your team if you've got that kicker. Then on the defensive side, congrats to everyone who had the Buffalo defense this week, getting a whopping 23 points. Probably helped you win the week. Then we had Baltimore at 11 and Chicago at 9 to round out the top 3 defenses of week 4. Handful of duds this week. Now these are duds where, don't worry, they're pivotal points on their offense. This is just a bad week for all of them. CeeDee Lamb, 2 for 13. Tyler Lockett, 4 for 24. Dalvin Cook, 34 yards, 2 for 10. Travis Kelce, 4 for 23. Mike Williams, a heartbreaking 1 for 11. Cortland Sutton, 3 for 47. And DeAndre Swift, 16 yards on the ground and 4 for 33. All of these guys are pivotal pieces to their offense. They might have had one bad week. Maybe it's 2 bad weeks in a row. Players are just inconsistent in fantasy football. You're just going to have to take your lumps and move on from this week after those performances. But there are some guys that are now kind of just up for debate because they haven't been good consistently through the first few weeks. Well, the biggest name is Allen Robinson, who's really just been a victim of quarterback play and offense so far. He is really good at wide receiver. We've seen that throughout the years, him being good for fantasy, even with bad quarterbacks, this is how much he's been hyper-targeted. With how anemic the Bears' offense has been, things are looking down for Allen Robinson. Best chance is that he either gets traded or Andy Dalton comes back and returns to be the starter. So he at least gets back to being hyper-targeted by a quarterback that can get him the football, because so far Justin Fields has showed that he can play QB at the NFL, but he's not going to be good for fantasy options for the Bears. Robert Tonyan, a lot of people drafted hoping to be Aaron Rodgers' number 2 in the offense. He's really just a touchdown or bust guy at this moment. He's not getting a lot of targets. He's not getting valuable targets. He's someone that you just have to kind of move on from, or he's going to be eating up a roster spot on your bench. Maybe you get lucky and he falls in the end zone for a touchdown next week, but that's where we're at with Robert Tonyan. Robert Woods has constantly been losing value every week. He finally did find the end zone. This is more to do with offensive scheme. It's been built around Cooper Kupp this year. Sean McVay has come out and said that it's on him for Robert Woods not getting enough of the ball. Most likely, Robert Woods will get more involved with offense going forward after this shutdown from the Arizona Cardinals. I think they saw that the game has been flowing through Cooper Kupp. You take away Cooper Kupp, now the offense has to get more creative. So I think that's what's going to happen going forward. We're going to see Cooper Kupp not stop exploding, but maybe cool down just a little bit, and Robert Woods should have a little bit more uptake. So just pretend that you didn't draft Robert Woods in the 4th round, and that maybe you just got him or you picked him up in the 6th or 7th round. You just need to change your outlook going forward. You have to forget about the draft capital that you invested in Robert Woods and just know how talented he is at wide receiver and just hold on to him until you can trust him again. Raiders wide receivers. If you're playing Henry Ruggs, you open for 1 or 2 deep shots that connects for a touchdown. Bryan Edwards, only valuable in overtime apparently. If we don't go into overtime, we don't see him at all. The only one you can really trust is Hunter Renfrow because he seems to be the 3rd down safety blanket. And if Darren Waller is being double or triple covered in the end zone, seems like Derek Carr has been finding Hunter Renfrow these short little right before the goal line quick plays, and he just ends up falling into the end zone for a touchdown. So Hunter Renfrow is a good flex play if you are desperate at that position. A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. We both know they've been dealing with injury. They're both injury-prone guys. I wouldn't be trying to move on from them right now unless I really need to. If I need to trade A.J. Brown for another piece because I need points right now. If you can afford to hold on to both of them, just hold on to them until they're healthy again. Then we got Myles Gaskin, Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, all running backs that have been a little disappointed recently with how short running backs are in fantasy. They're not guys you should drop, but if you can move on from them for maybe a different running back option, or maybe you can package a good wide receiver and one of them for a better running back, I could suggest doing that, but you shouldn't be dropping them. You should just be trying to take your lump for this week or this past week and move on from the bad performance. Tyson Williams started out the year hot, seemed like he was going to take over the backfield, had fumbling issues. Maybe the Ravens would give him a shot, having the 3rd yards per carry or 3rd yards per touch in the league. It seems being a healthy scratch literally in the middle of the day, which literally was super hard to deal with as managers were trying to scramble to find a replacement. Latavius Murray saw the majority of the snaps, the bulk of the carries. Le'Veon Bell saw 4 rushes for 11 yards, looked like who we thought Le'Veon was. If we go into a second week where they still roll with Le'Veon and Tyson Williams as a healthy scratch, then you might have to drop him. You might panic on him. It's one of those things where roster spots can be so valuable that holding on to a player that's going to be a healthy scratch for several weeks in a row, and that's going to be a hard thing to do if you don't have the ability to just hold on to him in case he comes back into the lineup. I only see him coming back into the lineup if we see a significant injury to Murray, or maybe they realize Le'Veon Bell isn't that guy and you see Williams getting back into the snap count. It's hard to know right now because we've seen so many different things from the Ravens backfield at the moment. Brandon Ayuk, another disappointing week, 1 catch for 15 yards. We don't really not know the insight to the 49ers offense. We know that they like Deebo Samuel. We know that they like George Kittle, and that's really about it. It's hard to gauge who's going to be the running back. It's hard to gauge what they're going to do offense, who's going to be the main focal point. So it's one of those things where if you're in a small league, 8-team, you could drop Brandon Ayuk. If you're in a 10-team or 12-team, you might have to hold on to him just because you know how talented he is. You know what could happen if he finally gets the ball. We just have to kind of wait and see what the offense finally becomes in the next week or two. If you find someone who really wants Brandon Ayuk, I definitely recommend trying to trade him or move on for him. Just make sure that you're getting something you like for him. You can't be expecting a 5th or 6th round pick because that's where you drafted him. That's not where he is at the moment. But if someone's kind of low on another piece and is willing to make that trade with you, then that's what you perhaps might just have to do. But I can't really drop Brandon Ayuk yet. If he has a 3rd bad game in a row, then all bets might be off. You might have to move on for him, man. And that's kind of just going to wrap this up real quickly. I don't want to get super deep into matchups because I'm only going to give you a handful of them. There's just, it's fantasy. But we got to get into the clan of the week just to honor John Rumney's little segment at the end. But unfortunately, John didn't put in his clown of the week. So John, you are your own clown. But Brian just wants to put out that wasting money on Hubbard, thinking he'll put up obscene numbers. I don't think anyone was expecting Chuba Hubbard to do what CMC normally does, but you wasted a good amount of fab on him. You were probably pretty disappointed with what you saw. And for me, if you got stuck with Robbie Gould as your kicker because he got injured in warmups, it's not your fault. That just sucks. You just feel so foolish for not being able to adjust for that because by the time he got hurt, there's maybe 4 kickers left that you could have had the chance to pick up if they weren't already on other teams, and most likely other people already owned them. So you most likely took a 0 at your kicker position if you're going into the week with Robbie Gould. If you played Damian Harris versus Tampa Bay, we know Tampa Bay has a really good rushing defense. We know Damian Harris doesn't get the receiving work. So if you play Damian Harris with confidence, you probably felt really foolish at the end of this week. And I also have to count myself for finally trusting Derek Carr. Derek Carr seems to be that quarterback that's going to put up 20 to 25 points in the weeks you don't expect him to. In the one moment you feel like you can trust him, he disappoints you. He's still the passing leader in the NFL right now, even with his terrible performance versus the Chargers. But after what he did to me, I can't trust you anymore, Derek. And you said you hate fantasy, so that's 2 Raiders that have declared that they don't care about your fantasy team. That's Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs. But on the other hand, Darren Waller's about fantasy and Carlson's about fantasy. So I like having players that like fantasy teams because they understand what that brings to them for a fan base. The NFL players that disregard fantasy, that swear it off, that love to give fantasy managers a hard time, don't trust them because they're probably most likely going to let you down if they have a tough matchup. But that's just going to wrap up this really short episode. Hope to see you guys next time. We'll have a much more full episode. Hopefully the Red Sox aren't into the playoffs. Sorry if that hurts to say out loud, but I want my co-hosts back. I want their help. It's fun when there's more of us involved. As always, cheers.